We all have this idea about friendship, right? That it's some kind of magic, something that just happens if you're lucky. But what if that whole idea is wrong? In this explainer, we're going to break down the actual science of how friendships are really built.
Yeah, we have this romantic notion that we're supposed to just wait for a mysterious spark, that social lightning bolt to strike without warning. We're always looking for that instant vibe, that immediate chemistry that just tells you, yep, this is my person.
But here's the thing. When you actually look at the data, that whole story just kind of falls apart. It turns out friendship isn't some random accident at all. It's actually a predictable, almost mechanical process, and it's driven by some really specific, understandable factors.
So that raises a pretty powerful question, doesn't it? What if you could stop just waiting around for social lightning to strike? What if instead you could become the architect of your own social life? Well, let's explore exactly how that works.
Okay, so where do we start? It all begins with two of the most powerful and honestly most overlooked ingredients in the entire friendship recipe: simply being near people and seeing them over and over again.
This is something called the propinquity effect, and it's kind of ironic, right? In our age of global connection and social media, your most likely best friend is still the person who lives down the hall, or sits at the next desk, or is in your Tuesday gym class. Simple physical proximity is still one of the absolute strongest predictors of friendship.
And here's why that proximity is so important. It's called the mere exposure effect. You know the old saying, familiarity breeds contempt? Well, when it comes to friendship, it's the complete opposite. Familiarity actually breeds liking. Every casual, unplanned encounter lowers that social awkwardness and builds a sense of safety, until just saying hello feels normal instead of like a huge effort.
And this is exactly why we put way too much pressure on first impressions. The real connection, it isn't forged in one single perfect meeting. Nope, it's built in the slow accumulation of all those kind of boring, low-stakes moments. A quick nod at the coffee machine, a brief chat in the elevator, that's where the real foundation is laid.
So this really illustrates the huge shift in thinking we need. We assume friendship is all about some mysterious chemistry, but the research shows it's really more like math. It's about accumulated hours. And it makes you wonder, right? How many potential friendships have just withered away simply because we mistook a lack of time for a lack of a vibe?
Okay, so proximity and time have opened the door. But how do you actually walk through it? How do you turn an acquaintance into a genuine friend? Well, the answer lies in the art of vulnerability.
Psychologists have a fancy name for this: social penetration theory. But a much better way to think of it is as the social onion. You don't just jump straight to the core. No way. You start with those safe outer layers, small talk about work or the weather. Then, as trust is built, you gradually peel back the next layer, sharing opinions and views, until eventually you get to the core of who you are: your fears, your failures, and your ambitions.
So what makes us feel safe enough to peel back one of those layers? It comes down to this really powerful principle called reciprocal liking. And it's incredibly simple. We like people who we think like us. That's it. When you get a clear signal that someone actually enjoys your company, that fear of rejection just starts to melt away, making it so much easier to take a small emotional risk and open up.
And taking that risk, that leads to the single most important moment in forming a deep friendship. It's when one person shares something real and authentic, the messy part of themselves, and the other person responds not with judgment, but with acceptance. That right there, that is the turning point.
But connection isn't only built sitting face-to-face over coffee. Actually, some of the strongest bonds are forged when you're side by side, totally focused on something else.
This is the whole idea of a third thing. Instead of trying to force a direct conversation, you bond over a shared activity, a project at work, a fitness goal, a creative collaboration. This creates a really natural alliance, and it allows the connection to develop organically, without all that pressure.
You see this most clearly in really high-stakes environments. Think about the intense camaraderie you find in tech startups, or in military units, or even during a shared travel disaster. These shared struggles forge this private world between people, full of inside jokes and memories that nobody else can access. You've been through something together, and that creates a bond that's just about unbreakable.
And this points to a really key psychological finding. Celebrating the wins, the highs, is fun, for sure. But the real glue of friendship, that's formed down in the trenches.
Showing up when someone is stressed or struggling or failing, that builds a level of trust and loyalty that 1,000 parties never could.
All right, so let's put this all together. If friendship isn't magic, then what is it? Well, it's a formula. It's a process that you can actually understand, and more importantly, one that you can influence. So here it is, the friendship formula. Think of it as the emotional infrastructure of connection. You need proximity, just being around people. You need repetition, seeing them often. You need a shared experience, doing things together. This all builds a foundation of trust, and the whole thing happens over time.
And this brings us back to the most crucial point of all. That spark, that amazing feeling of chemistry we're all chasing. It isn't the mysterious force that starts a friendship. It's the feeling you get when all the other conditions in this formula have finally clicked into place. The spark is the result, not the cause.
So what does this all mean for you? Well, if friendship is a predictable outcome of these conditions, then guess what? The power is in your hands. It stops being about luck and starts being about logistics. So the only real question left to ask yourself is this: are you intentionally putting yourself in the right rooms to let the formula work its magic?